I didn't turn around because I already knew something was there. The sound came from directly behind me, close enough to feel it in my back, but the snow on the ground was untouched. No footprints, no movement, just the sound again, right behind me. If you ever hear something standing that close in the snow and there's nothing there when you look, don't stay to figure out why.
My name is Marcus, and I heard him before I turned, because the sound came too close and too clean to be anything else. I had just locked the side door of the maintenance building and stepped into a layer of fresh snow that had not been there an hour earlier. The storm was light but steady. It covered the asphalt, and it showed every mark. If anyone had walked across that service road before me, I would have seen it. I took 2 steps toward the employee lot and heard 1 step directly behind me. Not somewhere off to the side, not behind a car. Not near the fence, right behind me, close enough that the muscles in my neck tightened before I even stopped moving. I froze, and the sound stopped with me. I looked down first. 1 line of prints in the snow. Mine, dark wet boot marks, leading away from the door. No second set, no crossing pattern, no drag, nothing. I stayed still for a few seconds, listening while the wind moved lightly around the corner of the building. Snow touched my face. The weak yellow lamp over the door buzzed once. I turned around slowly. Empty road. Closed door, brick wall. A row of metal bins half-coated in white. No person, no shadow moving off. No one crouched between the bins. I stood there longer than I should have, then turned back toward my car. It sat alone under the last lamp at the edge of the lot, half covered in white, windshield already frosting over at the corners. I started walking again, and the sound came back on my 3rd step. Crunch, same distance, same pace, directly behind me. I turned fast this time. Nothing, only my own line of prints. The open road behind me was untouched. The snow near the fence was smooth. No sign of anyone stepping out of the dark and back again. I kept walking faster now, and the steps matched me. Never closer. Never farther, just 1 pace behind. Exact, close enough to feel it in my back. I reached the car, hit the unlock button, yanked the door open, got inside, and locked it immediately. I didn't move for a moment. I just listened. Then something pressed into the back of my seat from directly behind me. Not hard, just enough for the fabric to move against my shoulder blades. I went rigid and looked into the rearview mirror. The back seat was empty. Empty headrests, no movement. But the center of the rear bench was pushed down, as if something had leaned forward, and then stopped. I stared at it until it slowly rose back into shape. My keys slipped in my hand when I tried to start the car, and by the time the engine turned over, my fingers were numb. I threw the car in reverse and backed out too fast. Tires slipping once before catching as the car angled toward the gate. My headlights crossed the side of the maintenance building, and a man was standing exactly where my footprints began. I had looked at that same patch of snow twice. He stood with his arms at his sides, dark jacket open at the throat, no hat, snow collecting on his hair and shoulders. He was facing me, close enough to see his shape clearly. He was not moving. I touched the brake without meaning to, and red light filled the falling snow behind me. In that red light, the ground around him was smooth. No footprints leading to where he stood, none leaving it. I drove to the gate, punched the code with a shaking hand, and waited for it to slide open. I checked the mirror once. He was still by the building. I checked again a few seconds later, and he was halfway across the lot. I had not seen him move. No transition, just closer. The gate opened enough for the car, and I pulled out, heading down the access road without looking back again. The mountain road below the resort curved through dark trees and dropped toward town in a series of bends that always felt longer at night. Snow came harder once I left the property lights behind. and my beams cut a narrow white tunnel through it. Everything outside that tunnel stayed dark. I kept checking the rearview mirror, and the back seat stayed empty. 2 bends down, my phone buzzed in the cup holder. Unknown number. I let it ring. A few seconds later, it buzzed again. Same number. Then again. I flipped it, face down, and kept driving. At the overlook turnout, near the first steep drop, I saw a figure on the shoulder ahead. I braked hard, and the car slid half a second before straightening. It was him. Same jacket, same bare head. Same still posture, standing at the edge of the road. Snow had built up on his shoulders. He was facing away when my lights hit him. Then he turned his head toward me. His face looked pale in the beams. Nothing came out of his mouth. No breath, not even once. He raised one hand slowly and pointed behind me. I looked into the mirror on instinct. Back seat empty, rear window dark. When I looked forward again, the shoulder was clear. No man, no movement in the trees, no line of prints in the snowbank where he had stood. I accelerated and did not slow down again until I reached the gas station at the bottom of the road. It was the only place still open that late. 2 pumps, small office, bright windows, a plow truck idling near the air machine. I parked under the lights and stayed inside for a moment. I watched the mirrors. I listened. Nothing. Then I looked at the floor behind my seat. It was wet. Not random patches, 2 narrow shapes side by side, like something had been standing there with both feet pressed into the carpet. I got out, locked the door, and went inside. The clerk looked up and asked if I was all right. I said yes. He kept looking at me, then passed me through the window. He asked if I came in alone. I said yes. He said he thought he saw someone in the back seat when I pulled in. I didn't answer. I went back outside with him anyway. We checked the car, doors locked, windows closed, no one inside. The plow driver came over with a flashlight and swept the beam across the rear floor. He stopped and didn't say anything. He just kept the light there for a few seconds, then moved it to the outside of the rear window. 2 streaks had formed in the frost, clear trails where fingers had pressed and dragged slightly. He told me I could wait there a while if I wanted. I said no and drove home without stopping again. When I parked, I left the engine running for a moment and watched the mirror. The back seat stayed empty. I got out, locked the car, and went inside. I checked every room. Nothing. I stayed awake. Around early morning, I heard a sound outside my door. Not a knock, a slow scrape. I stood near the door without making noise. Then I heard breathing. Close, just on the other side. I watched the gap under the door. No shadow. Then the peephole went black. Something covered it. I didn't move. After a few seconds, the light came back and the breathing stopped. I waited before checking. The hallway was empty. I opened the door slightly, with the chain still on. The floor mat was wet, and a narrow line of packed snow sat on it. Not a full print, just the front edge. I closed the door and locked everything again. Later that morning, I went down to the parking lot. The snow had started melting. I opened the back door of the car. The carpet was dry. No marks, no stains, nothing. I stepped back and looked at the rear window. 2 handprints were still visible in the thin frost, fresh, clear, side by side at eye level. I didn't touch them. I just stood there looking, because the worst part was not seeing him. It was knowing he was already there before I even stopped walking. Story 2. My name is Elias, and I heard it before I saw anything because the sound came too close for the street to be that empty. I had just parked 2 blocks from my apartment after a late shift, and the snow had already covered most of the road. Not deep, just enough to erase older tracks and make everything look untouched again. My car was the only one on that side of the street. No headlights, no engines, no movement behind the windows of the buildings. Just the sound of snow hitting fabric and metal, and the low hum of a streetlight above me. I stepped out, locked the door, and started walking toward my building. My boots pressed into the snow, leaving a clear line of prints behind me. The cold hit through the soles immediately, and the air felt heavier than it should have. Every sound carried too clearly. I made it halfway down the block before I heard another step directly behind me. Same rhythm, same distance. I stopped, and the sound stopped with me. I didn't turn immediately. I looked down first. One set of prints, mine, straight line from the car. No second pattern, no crossing marks, nothing behind them. The edges of each print were still sharp. No disturbance, no overlapping. I stayed still for a few seconds, listening while the wind moved between the buildings. No footsteps, no breathing, nothing else. I turned around slowly. The street behind me was empty. My car under the distant light, my footprints leading back to it. No one there, no one walking away, no doors opening, no shadows shifting. The windows stayed dark. I could see my own breath in the air, but nothing else moved. I turned back and started walking again, and the sound came back instantly. One step behind me, same distance. The timing was exact. My foot pressed down and then his. I walked faster and the sound matched me again. Not catching up, not falling behind, always one step back, close enough that I could feel it in my spine. I turned quickly. Nothing. Still only my prints. No disruption in the snow. No second path forming. The buildings on both sides were silent. No lights turning on. No curtains moving. Just the orange glow of the streetlights reflecting off the snow. My building entrance was ahead. Glass door. Narrow stairwell inside. I kept moving, and the sound stayed behind me. Same rhythm. Same spacing. I could hear the crunch. Clearly. Now. Too clear. Like it was happening inside the same space as me, and not behind me. I reached the door, pulled it open, stepped inside and shut it behind me. The sound stopped the moment the door closed. I stood there without moving. I didn't breathe for a moment. I just listened. Silence. The hum of the hallway light, nothing else. I looked back through the glass. The street was empty. My footprints stretched back to the car. Nothing else disturbed the snow. No second set. No overlapping marks. I stayed there longer than I should have. Then I turned and went upstairs. Second floor. End of the hallway. I unlocked the door, went inside, and locked it immediately. I checked every room, kitchen, bathroom, bedroom, closet, nothing. I even checked behind the shower curtain and under the bed, empty. I left the lights on and stood in the middle of the living room. I listened. No sound, no movement. The apartment felt still, but not quiet, like something had just stopped moving before I noticed it. After a few minutes, I went to the window and looked down at the street. My car was still there. The snow was still falling. My line of footprints was visible under the streetlight, but something had changed. There was now a second set of prints, starting halfway down the block, exactly where I had first heard the sound. They followed my path. Same spacing, same direction. Each step placed just behind mine. Not overlapping, not beside, always one step back. They stopped directly in front of my building entrance. No prints leading away, no sign of turning, just ending there. I didn't move. I just stared at them. I hadn't seen anyone. There had been nothing behind me. I stepped back from the window slowly. I didn't turn off the lights. I didn't sit down. I stayed standing in the middle of the room for a long time. Every small sound made me look at the door. pipes shifting, floor creaks from other apartments, distant movement through walls. Everything sounded closer than it should have. Around 3 in the morning, I heard something outside my apartment door. Not footsteps, not voices, just a slow movement, like fabric, brushing lightly against the wall. I stood still, watching the door. Then I heard it. One step, right outside. Same sound as before, same pressure, same weight. I moved closer without making noise. The hallway light under the door was dim but steady. No shadow, no movement. Just that sound again. A step, then another. Same rhythm as before. Close. Directly on the other side, I stood there listening. My hand stayed away from the handle. The sound stopped, and silence filled the hallway again. Then something touched the door. Not a knock, not a push. Just a light contact enough to make the wood shift slightly. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I stayed there until the pressure disappeared. I waited longer before stepping back. I didn't sleep. Not even for a minute. I stayed in the same position until the light outside began to change. When morning came, I opened the door slowly. The hallway was empty, clean, no marks on the floor, nothing out of place. I walked downstairs carefully. Each step echoed more than usual. When I reached the entrance, I stopped before opening the door. Then I pulled it open and stepped outside. The street looked normal. Snow had started melting in thin patches along the edges. My footprints from the night before were gone, so were the second set. The ground was smooth again. I stood there for a moment, looking at the area where they had been. Nothing remained. I walked to my car slowly. When I reached it, I stopped again. 2 marks were visible on the rear window. Not random, not smeared. 2 handprints, side by side at eye level facing inward, as if someone had been standing right behind me, looking into the car while I was inside. The fingers were long, pressed evenly, no sliding, no distortion, just placed there. I stayed there for a few seconds without touching the door. Then I unlocked it and got in. I locked it immediately and checked the rearview mirror. The back seat was empty. The fabric looked undisturbed, no weight, no indentation. I stayed still. I listened. Nothing. I started the engine. The heater came on slowly. The windows began to clear. The handprints remained visible for a few seconds, longer, before fading. I kept watching the mirror until they disappeared completely. I drove to work without turning the radio on. Every red light felt longer than usual. Every reflection in the glass made me look twice. That night, when I got home, it was snowing again. The street looked clean, untouched. I parked in the same spot and sat there for a moment. The engine ticked as it cooled. Then I turned it off and opened the door. I stepped out into the snow and closed it behind me. I looked down at the ground. My footprints appeared one by one as I walked, clear, defined. I made it a few steps forward. Then I stopped. I didn't move. I just listened. For a moment, there was nothing. Then I heard it again. 1 step behind me. Same distance, same rhythm. I didn't turn. I didn't look down. I didn't check the glass. I just kept walking toward the building. I reached my apartment door and unlocked it. I stepped inside and locked it behind me. I turned on the hallway light. The floor mat was dry. I looked down. There was a single wet footprint on the wood inside the apartment, facing inward. Not mine. The shape was longer. The toes pressed deeper than they should have. I didn't move. I didn't step closer. I just stood there looking at it, because I knew something had already crossed the door before I did, and this time, it didn't stay behind me. Story 3. My name is Daniel, and I noticed him because he was already inside before the train doors closed. It was the last train of the night, almost empty. Just a few people spaced out across the carriage. I sat near the middle facing the aisle, and my stop was 20 minutes away. The doors opened at the station, and a few people got off. No one got on. At least that's what it looked like. The platform was empty. No movement near the doors. Then they started to close. And just before they met, something shifted inside the reflection on the glass. I looked up, and there was a man standing in the aisle. Close, too close. He hadn't walked past me. I would have seen him. There was no sound of steps, no movement in the corner of my eye. He was just there facing forward, not holding on to anything. The train started moving, and he didn't react. No sway, no adjustment to the motion, just standing there. His coat was thin, no hat, no gloves. His hands were hanging at his sides and his fingers looked stiff. I watched him for a few seconds, waiting for him to move, to look around, to do anything normal. He didn't. The other passengers didn't react either. No one looked up. No one shifted. It was like he wasn't there for them. The lights above flickered once as the train entered the tunnel, and for a moment, everything went dim. When the lights stabilized, he was one seat closer. I didn't see him step. There was no sound. He was just closer, same posture, same direction, facing forward. I leaned slightly to the side to see his face, pale, still. His eyes were open but not focused on anything, not blinking. The train rattled along the track, and the windows showed only darkness. I looked around again, and the people in the carriage were still in their own space. No one reacting, no one looking at him. I checked the reflection in the window, and he was behind me there, closer than he should have been. I turned quickly, and he was still in front of me, same distance as before. The reflection had been wrong. I stood up slowly because I didn't want to stay seated with him that close. As soon as I stood, he moved again. No step, no shift, just closer, now only a few feet away. I could see the detail in his hands. The skin looked tight, pale, slightly wet, not from snow, just damp. I moved toward the next carriage door, and it slid open with a delay. I stepped through and turned back. He was already at the doorway. No transition, just there. I pushed into the next carriage and let the door close behind me. This one was emptier. Only one person at the far end, head down, not moving. I walked to the middle and stopped. The train slowed as it approached the next station, and the lights flickered again. When they steadied, he was standing directly behind me, close enough that I could feel the cold coming off him. Not air from the tunnel, not a draft, a different kind of cold. I didn't turn. I stayed still, then I felt it. Pressure on my back, light, not enough to push, just contact, like someone resting their hand flat between my shoulders. I stepped forward quickly, and the pressure disappeared. I turned, and he was a few steps away again. Same posture, same empty face. The train stopped, and the doors opened. No one got on, no one got off. The person at the far end of the carriage hadn't moved. I stepped onto the platform, and the air outside was colder. I walked fast along the platform, without looking back. The train doors stayed open behind me, and no footsteps followed. I kept walking until I reached the stairs and went up, 2 at a time. When I reached the top, I stopped and looked down toward the platform. The train was still there, doors open, empty, no one standing inside, no man in the aisle. I waited until the doors closed and the train left. Then I turned and walked toward the exit. The street outside the station was quiet. No cars, no people, just the sound of wind moving along the buildings. I walked home without stopping. I didn't look behind me. I didn't check reflections. I didn't slow down. When I reached my building, I unlocked the door and went inside. I checked the stairwell, empty. I went up to my apartment and unlocked the door. I stepped inside and locked it behind me. I turned on the light, and everything looked normal, nothing out of place. I moved through each room quickly. Kitchen, bathroom, bedroom, closet. Nothing. I went back to the living room and sat down. My hands were still cold. Not from outside, something else. I stayed there for a few minutes, listening. The building was quiet. No movement in the hallway, no voices. Then I heard it, a sound from inside the apartment. Not from the walls, not from the pipes, from behind me. A small shift, fabric against fabric. I didn't move, I didn't turn. Then the pressure came back, same place, between my shoulders. Light, flat, still. I stayed, frozen. I could feel it clearly now. My flat, the weight of a hand, the shape of fingers resting there, not pushing, not grabbing, just placed. I reached forward slowly and picked up my phone from the table. I opened the camera without turning around. I switched it to front view and angled it slightly. The screen showed my face, pale, eyes wide. Behind me, just over my shoulder, something darker, blocked part of the light, a shape, close, too close. I didn't move the phone any further. I didn't turn. The shape stayed there. Then it shifted slightly, not stepping, just adjusting, closer. The pressure on my back increased just a little, enough to feel the full contact of the hand. I lowered the phone slowly, because I didn't want to see it again. I sat there for a long time without moving, and the pressure stayed. Steady, cold. When it finally lifted, it didn't feel like it moved away. It just stopped being there. I stayed still for a few more minutes. Then I stood up slowly and turned around. The room was empty. No one behind me, no movement, no shadow out of place. I checked every room again. Nothing. I went to the door and checked the lock. Still closed. Chain still in place. I went back to the table and looked at my phone. Camera was still open. The last frame was frozen on the screen. My face in the foreground, and behind me, a hand resting clearly between my shoulders. Not blurred, not shadow, visible, real. I didn't delete it. I didn't send it. I just turned the screen off. That night, I didn't sleep. I stayed sitting with my back against the wall, watching the room, listening. Around early morning, I felt it again. Not on my back this time, on my shoulder, resting, waiting. And this time, I understood something I hadn't before. It wasn't following me. It wasn't arriving late. It had already been there the entire time. If there's one thing you should take from this, it's that you don't always hear it getting closer. Sometimes it doesn't make a sound. Sometimes it doesn't leave a sign. Sometimes it stays exactly one step behind you the whole time. Close enough to see you. Close enough to follow every move you make. And the worst part is, you only notice it when it's already too late to turn around. If one of these stories stayed with you, tell me in the comments which one felt the most real. And if you want more disturbing stories like these, subscribe to Tales of the Darkness and turn on notifications. Because next time, you might not be the one walking alone. Sleep well.